Okay, it's going.
Hey, James. Yeah. So anyway, this is an uncharacteristically small showing so far, at 5 after the hour. Typically, we have 10 plus people on. Okay. Everyone's starting to join. Welcome everyone to the MicroProfile Live Hangout. I will paste the meeting minutes link in the notes. It is everyone's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility, I should say, to take notes. So let me do this. Paste the notes in.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
From
Okay.
Santa Monica.
There is a link. Let me make sure that's the right one. MicroProfile Live Hangout meeting minutes. Okay, I think that's it.
I see it.
All right, thank you. If everyone could, all right, everyone started adding their names. Okay, looks like Emily's not going to make it. Talk a little bit about.
Oh.
All right, so starting out with MicroProfile 1.4, we kind of, last week, well, actually over the past couple of meetings, I should say, we've been, talking about doing the how-tos, and we also, there's been some pushback on just having this be, improved developer experience kind of release and actually deliver incremental updates to the specs. So one of the things I was going to do was ask folks to give a status on the various specs that they were leading, but looks like we don't have representatives from all of the specs. So I think I'll have to do that in the Google group. I had an action item to take a look at the iGuides from IBM to actually look at, could we, as a developer, enablement kind of how-to approach to help educate developers on, MicroProfile specs. I took a look at the IBM iGuides, and Kevin, my primary comment about the iGuide, I looked at the config one. I didn't see any change. You mentioned there might be some changes pushed to some of the iGuides. So I haven't seen any changes, but it seems like, to me, it is a little bit of a high bar because there, in fact, actually, I should have put a link in. I'll put a link in sometime during this meeting. But I looked at the config one, and I think it sets a little bit of a high bar for community contributions, because if you look at the way it's formatted, there's JavaScript. In fact, I think I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to paste it in. I apologize.
Yeah, because John, is the config one, isn't that one of the interactive ones?
Yeah, and maybe I looked at the wrong one. But it is, oops, actually that's the Open Liberty. Let's see if there's guide. Yeah, there's a guide, MicroProfile Health. Sorry, I'm looking for the config one. Okay, figures it's probably like the last one here in the list. Let me look for config. iGuide MicroProfile config, here we go. So I'm going to paste this in the chat. So we were talking to, Kevin thought maybe we could just leverage the IBM iGuides and perhaps rebrand them as a MicroProfile project and begin kind of developing these in the MicroProfile community. But when I started looking through some of these, there's lots of, there's JavaScript UI elements, there's CSS, HTML, then there's the actual source code to stuff. And my primary thought about that is that it's kind of a high bar for developers, if we want to encourage community contributions, to kind of take that particular approach. So maybe it's just me, let's see if I can find I have another how-to example that I had done.
I don't, maybe I don't understand what you mean by high bar. I know 2 weeks ago before I flew to Germany, when you were just back, you say you would be the guinea pig to fork on Friday or after Friday when IBM had hard stopped any development and before the conference, correct? For the conference in Las Vegas. And you're saying that you tested it, but it is too elegant. What? I don't understand.
No. Okay. So my point is, there's two links in the chat now. The first one is, I think there's three. I apologize. The first is the meeting minutes. The second is the iGuide for the MicroProfile config. The third one is just a Google Doc that was kind of showing a flow for how we might go about doing development of the how-to guides, right? That was just an example. And I can even put in chat, and I think what I'm going to have to do after the meeting is actually post all of these links in the meeting minutes. But I also tried, I didn't actually fork the code, because to be honest, it actually looked like it was quite an involved process. To be honest, to go through and change all of the things to be a wildfly swarm enabled, right? And that's kind of partially where I'm coming from, is that it looks like it could be a bit of a high bar if we want to encourage community contributions.
Yeah.
That's all. Versus what I've got in the Google Doc, which is very simple, right? It's like, here's some code snippets, right? Here's some steps. And the only thing we hadn't necessarily agreed, well, I think we kind of did, it's not in the doc, but, we had talked about, well, how do we enable these how-tos to build across all the runtimes? And I think during one of the calls we talked about, well, let's just go ahead and have everyone create their own profile for each runtime, right? So each how-to, they'll just say -p, whatever the runtime is, right?
So John? Yeah, John, let me interrupt just a little bit.
Yes, go
because
for it.
I think, unfortunately, you probably picked, I'll put quotes around, wrong guide to start with. We have like 2, maybe 3 guides that are interactive. And you picked one of those. And yes, those are much more involved and require a higher degree of involvement. The rest of the guides are what we call static guides. And I think even though they still have the open liberty angle to them, they're still more in line with what you might be looking for. Because yes, all the POM files are directed at Liberty, but it is something that could probably be modified to point at Swarm or Tommy or whatever.
Okay.
So what I put into the chat was a link to all of the openliberty.io guides. And on that page, if you search on MicroProfile, I think you should see, I don't know how many there are, maybe a dozen, 15, something like that. And the ones that are marked interactive, there's a little, lightning bolt on them. I would kind of skip those. But the other ones are the static ones that I would probably take a closer look at.
Okay. So if I grab a circuit breaker one here real quick. Oh, sorry. I should double check. Oh, that's interactive. I had this bad habit of picking the interactive ones. MicroProfile. Okay. Okay, here's a metrics one. So if we look at the metrics one, which I'm pasting the link in the chat, take a look here. Okay, yeah, this one looks more reasonable. And this is in GitHub as well?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll take a whack at this one. But did you do any kind of investigation as to whether or not these could be moved to the MicroProfile repo?
Yeah, that's what I started to talk with that team. We didn't get too far because we're kind of prepping for this conference. So we didn't come to a conclusion as to how we would best share them, but I'm sure we can figure out something.
Okay.
Kevin, let me give you feedback on the document. I just opened it. One sentence and it says 15 minutes. Great. short and to the point, and the level of, hey, you are here, you're going to do X. Good job.
Oh,
Yep.
wow. A good comment from Amelia. I feel great.
Seriously, I am not going to say a freaking word. You are already adding more things. I say it
Okay.
to everyone's face. But anyway, I like it.
Oh no. Okay. So I'll take a look at this one. Overall, just by a quick perusal, this looks actually pretty good.
I mean, it's
I will
still,
take.
you know, the instructions are still geared towards Liberty. I mean, I will admit that, but I think it's a little more doable than the interactive one that you were looking at.
It's a lot more doable. And you know, these can be adjusted, right, to be more neutral. But that gets back to, you know, I have to look at if there's a copyright on here, right? Copyright IBM, right? So that's going to have to be worked out.
Well,
Guys, it's open source. Open source is not owned by anyone, even the person who writes it.
Yep, they're all covered either by Apache or Eclipse public license. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
even if, you know, let's say my Liberty team, they decide, no, we don't want to start trying to figure out how to make these more generic. That doesn't stop you guys from saying, nope, we're going to fork it and we're going to do our own.
Yep.
But
even if it has a copyright on it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's true with all the code that anyone is contributing.
Yes, and that is true with open source. You know, well, anyway, I'm glad, Kevin, you agree with me. Setting rules.
Okay. All right, so I'll fork this and do this one. Yeah, the other one looked like it was a huge undertaking, which it would have been. This looks much more feasible.
Kevin, is it possible that because you are the awesome hero going through this testing, when you are adding into the minutes, can you add the links? Because after this call is done.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yep. I forgot.
Yeah, and then say, this is not doable because it's too complex and add whatever. This is doable, we're going to do X. And do add the CDI one. CDI is one of the best examples of anything out there, but it's maybe too much for us.
Okay. Okay, so I'll take a whack at this for Wildfly Swarm and see how. I'll pick one, and that's not interactive. Now I feel like a moron for picking like the most complex one, but I apologize for that.
No, and you just taught me a word. Whack it.
Oh, and this is being recorded too after I called myself a moron. All right, so okay, so let's pause on that. Boy, we don't have any of the spec leads. We're going to have to, I think, be more aggressive about making sure that we have representatives from each spec on these calls, because this is supposed to be a bit of a status call.
Yes.
So we're going to have to apply some what little authority anyone has, but pressure, you know, peer pressure, to attend the live hangout and give kind of updates. And we have Emily. Hey, Emily.
Hi.
You are the representative of maybe, I think, 2 projects. Speak up updates. We were talking about why are not there TED leads. So
you guys don't know it, but on my table I have a Ouija board. So.
Okay.
All right. So so since we have you here, Emily, we were just talking about, and we talked about in the last meeting about being opportunistic about releasing, a 1.4 spec that provides kind of the latest updates from the various spec teams. So for the specs that you're involved with, what do you think the opportunities are there for 1.4 release?
1.4 is a 2Q, right?
Technically supposed to be 1Q, but that's not gonna happen. But so it'll be 2Q, yeah.
Yeah, if it's 2Q, it's a MicroProfile of fault tolerance 1.1. We work really closely with Red Hat and Tommy Tribe, also Metrics. And we had a really good features, and also we want to get metrics integration in. So definitely fault tolerance 1.1 and also config 1.3. And for still, yes. So basically, in summary, yes, if it's 2Q, that will be a fault tolerance 1.1 and config 1.3. And also, sorry, and also we work with I work with Scott and also Mike Croft on the Istio aspect, and hopefully we move forward with that, and we will see as we go along. I'm not too sure how much we can release in that project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from an Istio and service mesh perspective, that's kind of an early working group, right? To kind of scope out concepts. So I wouldn't even want to try and squeeze something in related to that. So I'm going to start a thread in the Google group about 1.4 and see if we can pull in some of the other groups. I did bring it up to Scott Stark about JWT. So we'll see if I know he's been wanting to do a JWT update as well. So
yeah. I noticed that the Gitter chat, I think that they put some features in, so improved the interoperability aspect. I think in the JWT. I know Matrix also, is adding some stuff in. I think it's very possible they want to release a new version as well.
Okay.
Emily, I have a question about the projects you are part of.
Yes.
With Istio, have we gotten into contact with Ray from Google? Because
yes.
Google, so I was just with him and Javelin.
Yeah, you know, I in the Dev Nexus, I talked to Ray and also Josh Long. I talked to Ray for some time. Also, I had a long chat with Josh Long till 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, Josh, I cannot stay any longer.
I remember that. You were there at the party. I remember it. The best times are done at a bar. It's like the best.
Yeah, exactly. It's really cool. And actually, share something with you, all of you. So that's really, really good. I think Spring now is like acknowledge the MicroProfile's existence. So this is great. And he showed me the Spring config and also Spring framework. At the end, I said, actually, to be honest, the MicroProfile is still much easier to use and very simple. And also, I talked to other people in the DevNexus. They said, like, between Spring and MicroProfile, I think the gap is closing. So I think it's really good. Hopefully this kind of alternative to Spring, and this is really positive.
Yes, and I want to update on while we go to bringing communities together so that we can collaborate. During JavaLAN, we had a panel, right, about Jakarta, EE4J, MicroProfile, like just open questions and ask me anything, right? And in that panel, we had almost everyone's representation, as much as possible, 8 or 9 people. And we had Mark Heckler from Pivotal join. They are one of the newest vendors, not vendors, but partners that we have. And it was so nice because they showed unity. I think like you saying, Emily, all the talks that you have and we had at each event, and by saying, hey, try it, I will enable you. The saddest thing about this is that most times we do it because we're there and it's private, but then we don't bring it to the community and say, through a write and say, hey, I was here, we talked about X, now we're going to move forward to do X. And this is how easy it is to become a part of a project, right? I understand.
Okay, I apologize. So I'm trying to kind of keep this to our traditional agenda approach, which is spec updates. This is a parking lot item or an open item that we can talk about maybe a little bit later in the call.
Yeah.
But I think it is important getting feedback from DevNexus. Sorry, yeah, DevNexus. Yeah, in
Java
Java
land.
land. Yeah, Java land. Sorry. So, Emily, how long are you going to be on? Are you being able to be on for the whole call, or do you have to drop early?
Probably I will be on for another 20 minutes or maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. So I'd like to recognize a relative newcomer here, James Roper. Hey, James, how you doing? You sure started off a heck of a thread. It's a very popular thread, so I thought maybe if you want to introduce what you're trying to achieve and kind of how the discussion is going, and if you have any
Sure.
targets that you're thinking about.
Sure. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. So basically, the MDB and JMS haven't had any updates for many years, and I think the way people are doing messaging, particularly in microservices, has changed significantly since those specs kind of were first put together. Especially when it comes, I think messaging is a much more lighter weight thing now than it once was. Where it's kind of becoming a primary communication means in many microservices deployments, rather than kind of a very heavyweight thing where a process is handed off from one monolith to another. And then there's the convergence of that with the rise of reactive streams. JDK 9 has introduced that API, but the API also exists outside of JDK 9 in org.reactivestreams. And so yeah, my role at Lightbend is actually to see reactive streams adopted more broadly in the Java ecosystem, and this is one of the most strategic places because it's just really applicable. So that's kind of what I'm focusing my efforts on. So So what I've been doing is trying to in the proposal that I have, I've written not too much code, but a fair amount of code that shows a lot of different approaches that we could take. Too many approaches, but I've done it so we can look at them side by side and discuss them and work out what messaging should look like in MicroProfile. The stuff that I've done is based off the experience that I've had with doing similar APIs in Largom framework, which is Lightbend's microservices framework, and so taking some of the learnings from there and ideas and some of the shortcomings of that as well, I'm trying to address as well. And yeah, that's where I'm up to at the moment. I'm really interested in feedback from this group to find out is the approach I'm taking at the moment right? Am I it's hard for me to know if this is something that everybody sees as valuable, or if I'm just pushing my own agenda or what.
So I do have a question. Since you're looking at multiple approaches and looking at other specs, as the industry begins to adopt more reactive approaches, do you feel that the specs that we have need to also adjust accordingly? Right?
Yes. I'm not sure if you've come across a blog post I wrote maybe a month ago or now, and it was titled EE for J, it was titled something to do with EE for J and reactive streams. But I went through and catalogued a whole list of APIs that could adopt reactive streams. And I don't think reactive streams is the sole reactive API that forms what reactive is, but it is an important part of it. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of opportunities there and a lot of different EE for J / MicroProfile specs where reactive could be applied. Yeah, so examples. So I think it doesn't. Messaging is one place where it works kind of well in a self-contained manner, but it also works well if other specs support it. So, for example, it might be common to connect a message stream to a WebSocket. So if they support the same standard for streaming, then that becomes very easy. Same with server-side events and other HTTP features. Looked a little bit at CDI events, though I don't. I'm not familiar. I haven't used CDI events in Anger to know whether that's the right fit there. It can also be used and is already being used in the JDK9 HTTP client for just ordinary byte streams. So there's opportunities there in the Servlet API, and we've actually done some put together some stuff, and I think Servlet API is probably beyond the scope of MicroProfile to modify, but there's some options there.
So here's a fairly broad question for everybody, right? Does it make sense, or is it too, for lack of a better word, aggressive, to think about the messaging spec maybe being used as, air quotes, forcing function for us to think about reactive in other specs? Or is that just being too aggressive and let's just, focus on messaging as messaging?
So actually, I was going to ask James a similar question. So this is the kind of putting in more context about this new, repository. Do you foresee this is a kind of extend on what John said? Do you foresee the new the repository like a reactive or stream? Do you think it will go beyond the messaging? We can start with messaging. Do you think after this first release, we say, oh, okay, we will need to extend and add a little bit more on some other reactive aspect? So do you think this kind of will expand?
Yes, I definitely do. If we're going to embrace reactive and microprofile, I think it has to. One thing, I assume most of you are on the AE4J community list. I posted there about creating a guide for Jakarta EE for reactive guidelines. And perhaps we need to do a similar or the same, or perhaps it's a shared effort to work out what do we want reactive to look like. What are the best practices if it makes sense for a project to adopt reactive, or if there's a new project, and should projects be required to think about a reactive part. And so I think we definitely need to have a high level strategy there. I don't know how soon we need to do that, but it would definitely make sense to have some higher level beyond the messaging spec discussions before the messaging spec becomes a spec, because otherwise it's just going to do its own thing, and it might disagree with what people want to do in other specs. So
yeah, so I feel like because actually it's some other people also told me about this MicroProfile and compare with MicroProfile with the Spring. I think it's only two gaps. One is reactive, the other one MVC. But MVC is currently we have a new JSR in plan, and hopefully can be released very soon. So this is big thing is reactive. So we need to down this is pretty well for MicroProfile. We need to think about more apart from messaging, what else? And then I think we need a bit high level design principle, so we can directly create, like for example, like MicroProfile dash reactive, and the messaging can be part of it. And then we can expand and add more as we go along in the further releases.
Yeah. Just something else to raise. The biggest thing that's missing from reactive streams generally in Java is a standard way to manipulate them. So there are a number of different third-party solutions. Lightbend's one is called Arca Streams. There's also RX Java. Spring has Reactor. And these, they allow you to do, a map or a filter. And those sort of transformations on streams, and so currently to work with reactive streams without that is not really feasible, or something that we even want to encourage application developers to do. So we're working on the talking to people like Brian Gertz at the moment, and we've put together a proposal for a JDK level library. I don't know what the timing of that will be, or if it'll end up happening, but in the absence of that, it may make sense for MicroProfile to adopt that library maybe an earlier state, so that there is a MicroProfile standard way to work with reactive streams without having to bring in a third-party dependency that's outside of MicroProfile.
So one thing is, James, when this reactive MicroProfile reactive implemented, is okay to drag along the third-party libraries. That will be implementation details. For example, maybe like a Wildfly Swarm or Open Liberty, they can directly use this third-party. And then once you push the API to JDK, and then they can remove this third-party. So MicroProfile will not be affected. Yeah.
Yeah. So the main thing I'm not sure what your thoughts are on. So for it's good for the implementations themselves to use a reactive library like Open Liberty and Wildfly yeah, I'm more thinking of what the application developers use to do their actual code. I'm not sure. If you had a guide for messaging, is it okay to have step one add this third-party dependency, Arca Streams or RX Java, or would we want that to be fully self-contained? So just make sure you're using this MicroProfile endorsed or included API.
So does the application need to use this API?
Yes.
Okay. So that's so the other thing is depending on how many APIs are there. The other thing is what we have done in the past, you directly wrap it up, Open API and etc. We create our MicroProfile API, and that implementation directly uses third-party API as you have said. This is another solution.
Yeah. So that and it all depends on timing and how quickly we want to adopt reactive in MicroProfile. In the messaging spec, for example, one thing that I've done is ensure that there are options where in this kind of time where there's not a standard reactive streams utility, you can still use it without reactive streams.
Right.
So, and that may be that may be a solution for it as well, or that may be something that's going to increase the API surface area and not be useful long term. So maybe we should look more at the at getting a standard reactive streams manipulation API. I'm not sure. There's
I have a question
on the scope of right now, but.
James, hey,
yep.
Welcome to good to see you again. Welcome to MicroProfile. And the first time I see you in this call, so it's fantastic. Last 5N, it's great. So welcome. You mentioned that you were documenting or have been documented since you started seeing MicroProfile or analyzing MicroProfile and its connection or, alignment with reactive, correct? Or am I wrong?
I wrote a blog post about that. Yeah.
Yes, I read the blog post, but I mean, is it possible? Because we're asking you questions and you have so much data that we do not have. Is it possible for you to, using Git, MicroProfile Git, I think we can give you access or send a PR and just start documenting, because this is a totally new area. There is so much data. It's not going to be enough for you to trigger another email to not only to the email that you sent to the Jakarta, not Jakarta, to a MicroProfile, but use the forum again and send the link and say, this is the documentation I have this thus far. Send the question.
Happy to do that.
Can you do that? Can we start doing that so that you can feed not only the people in the school, but the community, so that the assumption that when can we implement it, it's not up to us. It's about how fast we can educate not only ourselves, but the community to see and to estimate. We are usually always behind, and it's not because we don't want to match the deadlines. It's just because there's so much data out there, and we are not doing a good job scaling the data. Let's write it up. Let's not be only verbal. And this is great, by the way.
Sure. If you just let me know where you want me to create
John,
that.
Kevin, can he have access to?
I don't need access. I can do pull requests. That's fine.
Yeah, do a pull request. Is that correct, John or Kevin? I like Kevin is in Las Vegas, and John, is it correct, this form for him to document?
Well, I mean, how we document things is kind of up to each individual. I tend to use Google Docs because it's an easy way to collaborate with comments and edits and stuff like that. And then later things can get done via pull request, but that's my personal approach.
And I am +1 into Google, because you need to ask questions, and Google Docs is the best way. So if we haven't give you access to the documents, pull in John and Kevin, said, guys, I need access, and write access. Start.
So okay, well, I mean, I can just start a generic Google Doc and just like make it public and open comments to anyone, and then send it to the list, if that makes sense.
Let's not do double work. You start directly on the MicroProfile platform. There is no work. Why? Just do it in open while you're doing it. Clearly, you can do a draft you want to and then paste it, but open, no double steps.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, I'll do it open.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to kind of cut this discussion here a little bit short. So yeah, let's collaborate around a Google Doc document. I think we do need to think about if this does, if we should consider broadening this out into other specs, the concept, not necessarily, adding reactive, right, to other specs. Just food for thought, maybe until next week, or we can start a Google group thread on it specifically. The other thing that would be nice to have an update on, Emily, is the Istio or Service Mesh Working Group.
Yeah. So so basically we meet weekly and with Mike and Scott and also Vadim from Istio project, and actually Ray promised to join from time to time, and he did say from Google, but he did say he's really busy with all the traveling and etc. And we raised quite a lot of issues, and actually took the lead on the fault tolerance interaction, Scott, and trying to figure out all these kind of terms and etc. And then he will look at the security aspect. And Mike is on health. I can't remember now. So basically, we all took some issues with us and prototype it, and we will socialize in the PRs. So we have done quite a bit background investigation and creating some samples and trying to experiment ourselves. And then we'll create a more statement and etc. in the data repository. So more things will emerge soon. So I have something to write up, and hopefully in the next few days, and more things will appear in the repository. So, and from that, sorry, just one more thing. And from this exercise, basically, so we want to push, get more spec individuals involved, and trying to implement it, and trying to share some ideas. Basically, is how to establish this ecosystem. Basically, for us, we are just front runners, and we are trying to uncover some obstacles, and eventually, we really want to get the all different specs involved, and make sure they implement the specs, and come up with some solutions. So gradually, this group, I think, is open to everybody, but we will try to encourage more people to join as we go along. But Scott has done one PR. I think Mike is going to do, is kind of spend some time on it. But I have something written in the background and trying to share as well. So I think it's overall it's really good. It's really worthwhile.
Okay. Do you guys have meeting minutes anywhere? Do you keep?
Yeah, we started logging minutes, but eventually we didn't. We didn't manage it. And we said, oh, it's one more thing. We use this. We can use this recording stuff. Maybe in the future we will record our chat. We'll do that. And because once we start busy talking, forget to type.
Yeah. So it's easy to record as we're doing now, for example, with this call, but it's hard for people that just want to keep track of what's going on to watch an hour of video.
Okay.
So it would be actually helpful if meeting minutes were taken, just the highlights, right? You don't even have to. They don't even have to be just decisions made, discussions and decisions or whatever, right? Action items, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we need to move from a oral community to a written community. I think James being here and pulling a new project, a new potential partner, is a great opportunity to show a good example of this. I have to apologize because last week I said that I will join each single call and make sure that at least one person of the technical microprofilers and each of the 8 projects was here. But JavaLand had no internet. It was so complicated, like in the level of joining a call, that I couldn't. So I will start now that I'm back. And it's not only that I will have to own this, but each one of us needs to own it, so that if any of the teams cannot join this call, they owe us a written report, and they need to go to the minutes and add it, and their minutes, and then say minutes added by X person, and move on. This is just a form of discipline. We need much more transparency. So I will make the point to join each call, and I will ask, because it's required, but everyone moving forward needs to hold everyone else accountable. When I speak to people, I just say immediately, why are you not joining this call? Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's my update.
Yeah, I mean, we are transparent. It's just, in order to be, it's just, but anyone can join anything and do anything. But yeah, documentation would definitely make communication a little bit better. Okay, so normally we go through the spec updates. That was kind of this section. The roadmap, we've kind of talked about updating to, adding a 2.0 release that is specs. That updates the specs that are Java EE8 related to Java EE8. So that's JAX-RS, CDI, JSON, and common annotations or whatever. So so we talked about the roadmap being that beyond just the 1.x series. The big question I think that's still that we talked about that we didn't necessarily come to resolution about last week is each, how do I say this? as soon as you move to Java EE8 specs and you start using functionality of Java EE8, then that means you can no longer deploy MicroProfile, 2.0 applications on a Java EE7 app server, right? Because you need the Java EE7 specs. Sorry, you need the Java EE8 specs, right? So here's a thought. It's up to each spec team to decide when they want to move to a Java EE. It's up to each spec in terms of when they want to move to a MicroProfile 2.0 baseline, right? MicroProfile 2.0 should be backwards compatible, right? Because Java EE is backwards compatible per se. So in that sense, we should be okay. But if, for example, I'm just going to pick a random spec, the metric spec decides, you know what, we want to use JAX-RS 2.1 APIs, right? We want to do some of that neat reactive stuff, or async, or whatever, right? Then they can do that, right? But it doesn't necessarily force all the other specs to do that. There might be exceptions. The exception would be config, right? Because other specs leverage config. So we do have to be, I think, have a well thought out, going into MicroProfile 2.0, let's say mid this year before Java 1, hopefully, have a well thought out strategy for how each of the specs are going to decide, whether or not when they move to the 2.0 APIs. Long way of probably saying a very simple thing. I apologize. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. We need to think this thoroughly about intro, like when this one particular stack decide to move up, depending on the Java EE specs, like CDI 2.0, for example, from I could say the fault tolerance from 1.2 version, and then we directly want to depend on the CDI 2.0. And from that point onwards, it's no longer relevant for the MicroProfile 1.x to continue the feature. So yeah, so we do need to think about all of this, mix and match and things carefully. I mean, stack by stack. Ah, I can hear the bird.
Yeah, you hear it? It's so cute. I agree with John, actually, and you are very careful to say how much level of flexibility. Well, you didn't say flexibility, but I am going to put it out here. How much level of flexibility are we able to comfortably own? It means each project, we have 8. And that means that we cannot answer those questions until we have those leads feeding us the data and telling us this is the issue and we will be comfortable with X. And we definitely need to get those awesome people in this call and also reach out. We can start a thread and CC that person plus the group and start a conversation. But I think candid conversations are much better. Thankfully, we have James and Emily, and we can see that they can answer questions, on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so all I'm really saying here is let's begin to think about each spec team begin to think about how they want to adopt the MicroProfile to new baseline being Java EE8, right? Because the decision of some specs may impact other specs. Primarily config, there might be others, but that just came off the top of my head. So let's begin that thought process. We've got a little bit of time, so I just thought I would bring that up.
John?
Yes.
So the one thing, just to expand on that, when you say each project or each sub-project would have to decide, I agree with that, but we have to make sure that we, kind of like what Amelia was getting at, we got to, bring that back. It can't be made in a vacuum. So,
yes.
Let's use your metrics as an example. I mean, they can't decide that in a vacuum and then come to us and say, hey, nope, we're not going to support 1.x anymore. So I just wanted to clarify.
That's
Yeah.
an excellent point. Yeah, both of you. Yeah.
I wanted to say discipline. Show we're mature. I think we're going to be 2 years old. Like, we can do this better, and we can align ourselves with something that is comfortable, that gives each project, giving how they explain it and how they own it. They need to close onto why they need X and X time, because not every project is by itself. Everything needs to be aligned. And that means we are not communicating enough if we are wandering and throwing, oh yeah, let's think about this, and open-ended. It needs to be close up. It needs to be at initial deadline. Let's talk about this, and then adjust it and document it.
So actually, to start with, what we can do, like we can create 2 tables: MicroProfile 1.x and MicroProfile 2.0. Like basically, we can place the specs in the different in the table. And if you really want to move from 1.x to 2.0, obviously there's a kind of reasons. Like they really want to use reactive, or want to use the reactive aspect. So that's why they have to move or something like that. And then it's like once they move from 1.x to 2.0, gradually, eventually 1.x will cease to exist, because all the spec move over, and then we need to.
Yeah, we need to be closer, but also each member needs to be closer and understand the why is necessary. I think conversation, and I think I need to get not jet lag and move and start joining those calls and get those awesome people in this call, so that they can become a more written and transparent community like they are. You just tell us here in this video hangout X, and I am stopped on this. We cannot do X, and stuff like that.
All right. I apologize here, so I'm going to cut in here a little bit. We have 3 minutes left for a marketing update. So I guess probably Amelia, that would maybe best be you, but I know that you've been traveling, so I don't know if you have anything to update on.
I haven't read the minutes. Driver Ryan was here, but then he had to go to another call. Okay. So I said to him to go. I haven't read the minutes, but I know that we have started the skeleton for the white paper that will be written by Lars. That is going to be moderated by Eclipse, and the white paper needs to be brought up to the MP forum CC marketing, so that the community can have direct feedback on how we will do X. Clearly, marketing is not the one leading the project. It is going to be not only technical, but a whole history of what happened, how do we create a MicroProfile, and then talk about each specification. To tell you the truth, John, you're correct. I have been traveling. I have yet to read it. It was just created yesterday. And I said, where is the skeleton? And then I said, I haven't seen the minutes. And then this morning they said the minutes were sent today. So I will check.
No, don't worry. Yeah, don't worry about it. Just wondering if there was,
White paper is super important. And the other priority that we have is one of the tasks about updating MicroProfile IO, and that is on me. So this morning I also got the skeleton of the things that were on to work alongside from the projects, add calendar in the minutes, in the all these things. We're going to adjust resources. Like these drafts I read an hour ago, and we're making some adjustments before we bring it to the design Google Drive for the community to give us feedback. Summit Drive will be working on this, but we will encourage everyone else that has access and it has resources to help us. So this will be brought before Friday.
Okay. I have a great idea.
Tell me.
Perhaps there would be interest from Lightbend in adding their logo to MicroProfile page. I don't know how, what's the right word? Long term, how interested Lightbend is in being active in MicroProfile. But if there's interest, then we have a pretty lightweight process around getting logos up on the page. So I just thought I'd pose the question.
I would be very keen on that.
Mm-hmm. And you just write a PR, James, a PR, and then because you're going to do so much documentation. When did you started checking out MicroProfile?
When did I start?
Yeah.
I don't know. 18 months ago, maybe, when it first started.
All right, so it's well deserving. You are look at
I've been
that.
more active in the past
Right.
month or two.
So you're walking the talk, and you are going to help us with the commentation and understanding what's what. Definitely, we can add a logo, but the logo has some specifications. Check the gets and then send the PR
Okay.
whenever you are ready. We will not
Is
push you.
this on the MicroProfile website, GitHub?
Yep.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
it's not there, you will help us make it better. Because if you cannot find it by yourself, we have things prepared.
Sure.
By we, that means Amelia.
Nope. No.
All right. So
All
we're at
right.
the top of the hour. I apologize. Thanks, Heiko, for joining. The time change, I think, probably screwed a few people up. But thanks, everyone, for joining. Same bat time, same bat channel in 2 weeks. And I'll talk to everyone then. Well, we'll all talk to each other then.
Thanks.
All right.
And we will
Bye.
talk over the list. So,
Yep.
bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.